Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. Look, just a very brief introduction for those who didn't attend the previous session. I'm a barrister of 32 years in the family court. I specialise in family law, that's all I do. I'm also an advocate for family violence, and I'm also an actor and producer. And more recently, we've set up a children's charity called To Be Loved Network. You can find it on tobeloved.org.au. And we produce resources to give children a voice navigating parental separation, divorce, and family violence. It's very important for us to have those resources, to be able to share those resources with people and hopefully make an impact on the lives of children ultimately. So that all came about as a result of my involvement with the Domestic Violence Task Force Committee, reporting to the Royal Commission on Family Violence. But basically, To Be Loved is a registered charity. Everyone who works at To Be Loved works on a pro bono basis, and we have purely a focus on children and giving them a voice in the process of family, as I said, family law separation and family violence. I'll read you something just briefly from a psychologist who supported the film, a little snippet about what he says about children in conflict. This is from Vincent Papaleo, who's a well-known clinical psychologist here in Melbourne. He says, for children whose parents are in high conflict, the experience is often like living in no man's land between feuding parties engaged in trench warfare. These children understand their parents' spoken and unspoken messages of restraint, their wish for alignment, and the expectation for loyalty to each parent's position, and the paradox associated with this dilemma. So that's very important what he says there. And the imagery which gave me the basis for Tommy was children who often stand midfield in the battlefield with each parent in a separate trench dug in, throwing hand grenades over at each other, with unfortunately some of those grenades landing a bit too close to the children. So that's the imagery for me, which gave me the idea of Tommy, a story about a little boy who's caught between his parents in conflict, where his parents are unable to protect him from their feelings and emotions, where they actively embroil him and burden him with responsibilities and expectations that are far beyond Tommy's capacity to cope. And for many children in Tommy's position, the transition across no man's land, or that battlefield I was telling you about, is fraught and dangerous. Children understand the conflicting views of parental reality, the intensity of their parents' feelings, and the negativity they harbour. Transitions can be particularly difficult. This is contact changeovers in a family law context. The depositing of these parental emotions can have profound impacts on the child's ability to integrate their parents, their extended families, and enjoy a sense of belonging, and can lead to problems around spending time, rejection of a parent, and of placing the child squarely as the linchpin to parental conflict. Whilst I accept that Tommy is a piece of fiction, the story depicts a reality for many children. And although I just said Tommy is a fiction, in one sense it's only partly so, because it actually emanates from a real case that I had must be nearly 20 years ago, where I was acting for a little boy who would have psychotic episodes due to the conflict that he was experiencing between his parents. And those psychotic episodes used to see that little boy imagining a blue kangaroo that he called Joey, that would feature pretty heavily in his life. He used to talk to Joey, much like Tommy spoke to Tiger Terry. And it wasn't until 2 years after the family law case that Joey, those images left that child, and obviously left him with significant psychological and emotional impacts. So that's the reason to produce films like Tommy, because I think it's an important paradigm for us as key influencers in this area, to underscore to parent, it's not about getting it right. A lot of parents frame things from their own point of view. I don't believe people lie. I just think that they see different colours, or they, as I said, they just frame things in a different way. But it's not about being right. What we need to show parents is it's about getting it right. And that's a paradigm shift that we need to make as influencers in this area, getting it right. Because if parents get it right, then the benefactors are the kids. So that's what I like to say.
We've got a question, Darren, and it says, it's from Madeline Bowen, and it says, I can imagine this would be so great at opening up conversation for children dealing with separation of their parents. Have you thought about doing another film that follows on, maybe to promote further discussion and conversation?
Yes, Madeline, I have. I'd like to do Tommy a few years on, and I'd like to explore the issues of enmeshment and perhaps even parental alienation, because from how I see it, that last scene when Tommy barrels the camera and basically is pleading for someone to help him, I think children in Tommy's position, often it's so hard that they end up just siding with one parent because they can't deal with the other parent, because not that they don't love the other parent, it's just that it's just too hard for them to deal with. So in answer to Madeline's question, yes, I have thought about it, and yes, I would like to do it.
Now, I don't think we have any other questions for the moment, but would you like to just make some further comments about how you might deal with something like that? Deal with another, I mean, what would be the process for doing another film? It would take you away from being a barrister, I should think.
Yeah, well, look, there's a couple of things I'd like to talk about. And one is with Tommy now, Tommy's available on Apple ITV. It's a whole $2.99, so it won't set the back too much, and all those monies go to the charity. Tommy has with it discussion papers, which I co-authored with myself and an attorney over in Kansas, where she operates the Lane Project, which focuses on kids' voices as well. And so we've got discussion papers that are available for, I think you might have those, but they're discussion papers for practitioners in the area, key influencers, and there's also a discussion paper for parents. And what those discussion papers do is that they tease out certain issues that are raised in the film. They provide answers, suggested answers, but also opportunity to explore other viewpoints, obviously. And it also deals with trauma and how memory is impacted by trauma. And as I said before, it deals with the paradigm of shifting from being right to getting it right. So I think those could be quite useful in terms of when you're instructing, if you're using the film, to get those messages across. Those discussion papers could be quite a useful tool as well. In terms of your question, Elizabeth, yes, unfortunately, I'm scarred with being a Gemini, so my attention span is about 2 seconds, and I take up information pretty quickly because I have to. But I get such a joy out of doing this work. It does take me away from my barrister work sometimes, but in one way, when I return back to my barrister's work, it makes me feel much more fulfilled, and certainly I'm also provided with a lot more knowledge from the experience of doing what I do, because I get out of that information a lot more. We're very careful when we do the films. We have, like Tommy had a preliminary conference with a psychologist friend of mine to prep him for the film. We also have to be very careful with that. He was also debriefed after the film. There were no issues with any of that, but we were very cautious of involving children in any films of this nature, and happily it was fine. Tommy's the son of a good friend of mine, so who's an actor. Actually, Tommy was in the Helen Reddy story just recently too on television, which was kind of cool. But look, in answer to your question, yes, it does take me away at times, but I do love it, and it enriches me as a human being. Yeah.
Thank you, Darren. And for people's information, Darren's discussion papers are in the Slack channel now. So we've got them there. And we have a question from John. Being a barrister, what outcomes do you see in today's society? And I imagine that means from the work you do.
Well, of the 100% of cases that are filed in the family court, there are only 5% of those cases that end up at a final hearing before a judge where people are cross-examined. Some of that's due to the delays in the process. You can be 2 to 3 years before your case gets heard in the family court. Some of them are due to costs, the significant legal costs. Some of them are due to the fact that people don't like not having any control over the situation and handing over their parental responsibilities to a judge that they don't know, who doesn't know the children. And finally, I think the most salient reason why there's only 5% that end up at a final hearing is because the emotional toll of litigation on people and families is very, very significant. So the 5% I see, I can say, John, the outcomes are terrible because no one gets what they want. The lawyers walk away getting paid, of course, so they're happy. But the thing that's become more and more compelling to me is that anyone who's involved in the family law process is traumatized at some level. And what the process seems to do is to further traumatize them. And of course, the fallout from that is on their parental capacity, because it must have a significant impact on them as parents. So the idea is to keep people out of the court system. The idea is to keep people working in the community with groups like yourselves, with partnerships with other groups, to help people that way in order to give them insight and in order to keep them out of the court system, because the court system is very destructive.
We have another, thanks for that. We have another question from an anonymous attendee. Is there scope to introduce this message from your film and book to educators, social workers, doctors, etc., as this is a social issue, not just a family law court issue?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is yes. I mean, it might seem quite disparate, but I had a knee operation about 5 years ago. And my orthopedic surgeon, before he met me, I was taken into a room and shown a film, an animated film on how my leg surgery was going to be conducted. And then I met with the specialist after that, and he asked me whether I had any questions on the film. And then he carried through with other stuff that he had to tell me about. And I thought, isn't that a wonderful way of explaining things? It was really simple. The message got across to me. I could still see the images in my head. And it sort of made me feel a little relaxed about the process. And I thought, wouldn't that be great to be able to show films like Tommy to people as an introduction? So as a precursor to alternate dispute resolution, with GPs who are seeing patients who are in the midst of family violence or some family breakdown episode, to show them that film, to a whole range of social workers and other specialists to have access to that film to help share a message, because the impact of the film is so important. Like, as I'm talking now, for example, I can say to you, remember that scene where Tommy was sucking up the spaghetti into his mouth? Or remember that scene where he's opening up the door of the submarine? Or remember that scene when he looks down the camera at the end with his blood over his face? You can instantly see those messages. It instantly reminds you of the film, and it instantly has a recall mechanism in your brain in terms of the power of that film and the messages it's got to show. So absolutely anonymous. I would embrace that with open arms. And as I said before in the previous session, I'll send a link through to the conference organisers in terms of the Tommy link for Apple ITV. And I would really be grateful and embrace any opportunity anyone has to show that film to clients or patients or whatever, to further inform them, because I think it can only be a real positive advantage in the long term.
I think that answers one of the questions about where we can watch the movie. So we'll have the link and we'll do something about it. Another one,
Sure.
Current responses to family abuse incidents primarily focus on victim and offender's needs. Is it possible that until there is legislative reform regards rights of a child exposed to family abuse, their voices will remain largely silent? Where do you see progress of social action towards this?
Okay, so it's slow. Progress is slow. The United Nations rights of children, rights of a child, are enveloped in the Family Law Act, but not literally, but they are enveloped. The ideas are enveloped in the Family Law Act. I think we have a little way to go in terms of what's questioned. And I think that change is slowly coming about. I think there was talk not long ago about judges speaking to children at the start of a case or at the conclusion of a case. A lot of judges are scared to do that, but I'm hoping that in the future that viewpoint will change, and it has to be driven by the force of social change. There's been a lot of research, as I've said before here today, by the Australian Institute of Family Studies, and the voice of a child is becoming stronger and stronger. And I think that's really important. Children have expressed a need not to be discounted in family court proceedings, but a need to be included. And it's not that children actually want their views adopted by the court. It's more so that they want their views to be heard and not discounted. And I think that's really important. The other thing is that they want their counsellors to be a little bit more partisan. They want their counsellors to feel genuine. They want to be heard by their counsellors or social workers, and they want to develop that rapport. Too often we see in family law cases where a family report writer will do a session on a family. The child might be spoken to for about 45 minutes to an hour, and that's it. The independent children's lawyer may see the child once, twice if they're lucky, before the final proceedings are dealt with. So all these sorts of things need to change, and they're only going to change if we as a community start adopting these ideas and either putting them forward to our local members or to vote change, or speak to our lawyers about it, or raise issues within the court system, people that we should be speaking to. That's how we're going to bring about change. Relationship centres are significant because they're at the coalface. And if we can start changing ideas at that level by using resources and forming partnerships, that is important, because 1 in 2 families nearly separate, we know, according to current stats. Of those families, 48% have children, and of those children, 65% are exposed to some form of family violence. Now, that is a significant figure. And when you relate that to our overall general population, and this is what we just know, it's a significant number of children that need our assistance. So getting back to the question, slowly but surely, I think we will get there. I think times are changing. I think our nanas used to say children should be seen and not heard. I don't think that's the case these days. I think children should be seen and should be heard, and shouldn't be, more importantly, children shouldn't be discounted.
It's a great answer, thank you. And this one says, pretend my name. No, don't have what this is from Jane. Oh, okay. I won't tell you who it's from, but let's say it's from Joan. And it says, have you made a room of people take notice of children's voices with children? So you'll have to interpret it. I'm reading it just as it is. Do you want me to read it again?
Give it to me again, Elizabeth.
Okay. Pretend my name is Joan. Why can't he? Pretend my name is Joan. How have you made a room of people take notice of children's voices with children?
Okay, well, that's a pretty general question, but what I'd say is this. I've been to many presentations over the years, and good ones and not so good ones. And it depends on the time of the day that you're listening. So you're listening now at 2:44 p.m. You might be ready for that afternoon coffee. So it's all very well, I think, sitting there listening to people talk. But I think when you've got something to show people, where you've got images that are going to imprint on people's minds, I think then it becomes a stronger message. So I'm not saying Tommy, because obviously I made Tommy, but I'm sure there'll be other films that could be viewed. But I think if you can get through something like Tommy, and for example, use a discussion paper like I've got with Tommy, that certainly teases out ideas. And in a room full of people, if you're presenting this live, I should imagine that there would be some very fruitful discussions about this. And even what I've found in doing this, particularly over in the United States, I've had groups pair off and say, okay, well, we want to form this group and we want to activate, for example, Tommy to be shown as a preliminary viewing to every alternate dispute resolution centre that's there before people start their fuller sessions with counsellors, and that we want to show Tommy to everyone. Or I had another group split up and say, let's set up an information session before court, not only explaining what people could anticipate in the court system, but also show them Tommy and show the devastating results that can happen to children in the event of parents not prioritising their needs ahead of their own. So I think you'd find that, like today, I think you'd find that you'd have some amazing conversations. But getting back to my thing, we can't do it alone. We've got to do it as partnerships. We've got to do it in groups of people, because a single voice is not as powerful as a tribal group. And I think we can do that.
Thanks very much for that one. I think we're going to have to keep going a little bit more quickly, because there's quite a few on the screen now. And the next one says, with respect, can you please comment on why you decided to make comparisons between same-sex relationships and drug abuse in the film, I guess she's talking about?
Yeah, well, we didn't intentionally underscore making comparisons between same-sex relationships and drug abuse. The primary focus on the film was to show that mum and dad both love Tommy, and they're decent people, just trying to do the best that they possibly can in the circumstances. We just didn't want to make some waspy film which deals with middle class areas. We wanted the film to be diverse, and to be diverse, we decided to throw in a same-sex relationship, which is not uncommon in the family court. I'm finding more and more, particularly the women I deal with, particularly those women who are victims of family abuse. It's not uncommon to see same-sex relationships as a fallout from a heterosexual relationship in those circumstances. The other thing with the drug abuse, again, another common theme we see in the family court with drug abusers, men and women. But I wanted to show in this case that Dad had gone through the hoops in terms of his rehabilitation, and he was trying to do the right thing by Tommy, even though his girlfriend was an adverse influence. Because the backstory to that was Dad was in rehab. That's why the parents split up in the first place. and dad met his girlfriend in rehabilitation, which is not uncommon. So, yeah, so it wasn't a specific comparison. I don't want to get into comparisons. I don't want to get in, oh, it's her fault or it's his fault. We wanted to show mum and dad as equally decent people trying to do the right things, but with priorities that were skewed.
What would you say is the target age group for readers of the book?
I'd say anything from about 3 to 9 at a push, something like that in that age group. Yeah.
Right. And how could you empower children in this journey so that their voice is heard?
Okay, so I'm a great believer in the dinner table. The dinner to my wife is a stalwart when it comes to we all eat our family meals together and growing up. So I think the dinner table is a great counselling tool. I think you get a lot of information from children at the dinner table. It's all phones down, all electronic devices are put away, and we have dinner as a family. In a separated household, that tool can still be used in terms of mum and child or children sit down, or dad and children sit down, and we discuss the day. We discuss what we've been through, the goods, the bads, the uglies, and we just talk. So I think for me, that's one way of getting the voice heard. And that's from a family point of view. From a professional point of view, so important to get kids seen to by qualified therapists to make sure that your child is travelling along okay, that they're coping with what's going on. Even if you think they are, they may not be. So please, if I can recommend anything, get your child to see an appropriate qualified therapist and make sure that he or she is okay. Yep. And sometimes those therapists involve parents in the process, depends on the stage of the therapy or what model they're adopting, but that's also helpful if there are any outstanding issues, because you need to address those issues as they're going on, because I'm no psychologist. I don't say that I am, but I've got enough experience as a family lawyer to see the wreckage children suffer from emotionally if their needs are not met from an emotional and psychological level as soon as possible at the start of the process.
Okay. Do you feel as though there needs to be a change in how much representation children have for themselves when it comes to court cases? For example, they have very limited things they can do about their own situation without an adult carer there, etc.
Sure. In the family court, we have people called independent children's lawyers. They are ordered by the court, and they have a particular and significant role to play in relation to court proceedings. They are funded by the from legal aid services. I know legal aid in Tasmania would fund independent children's lawyers as well. Those lawyers have training with children, and they also have to perform their duties under particular guidelines. Those guidelines are not enforceable, but they are valuable guidelines for independent children's lawyers to follow. It's a matter of the parents also taking up the reins to ensure that the independent children's lawyer speaks to the children, that they are appropriately represented, and that they have views in terms of what should happen to the child. Now, most independent children's lawyers will tell the child that because that despite the fact that children might have a certain wish, yes, they put forward that wish, but they may not recommend that wish. But usually that's enough for children in the sense that their wishes are not discounted in any way, that they're actually, that the judge gets to hear those wishes. But it's a matter also of keeping people honest, and I use that word colloquially, in terms of making sure that independent children's lawyers do their job. I mean, I often say to the lawyers, have you seen the children? Have you spoken to them? What their views are? Do you have a view yourself? And if they haven't got a view, I often tell the judge, I say, well, what's the use of having an independent children's lawyer here? They're just like any other lawyer. They've read the papers, and so what? So they need to be responsible and step up. And most are vetted by a legal aid panel, and they have the expertise to deal with children.
Do you see yourself wanting to tackle opening conversations about raising children as a single parent as opposed to separated? So instead,
well, no, not really, because our object with our charity is to give children a voice that come from separated families, and also those children are exposed to family violence, which in itself infers that most of those children would come from a family situation. However, some of the messages that we have in terms of, for example, what I was just telling you about, the dinner table, some of those messages will have some impact on single parents as well. So I think there's a lot of information that can be gleaned by single parents about what we do, but for us, our focus is on separated families.
okay. Well, I think that's the last question we have. So I guess it's, oh no, someone has another one. Oh,
Bottom one.
the bottom one, okay. 5 minutes to go. That's what I've got to tell you, Darren. But yeah, do you want to make any final comments?
Sorry?
Would you like to make any final comments? I've got a few, but we've only got 5 minutes till we finish.
Oh, well, look, first of all, I'd like to thank you at Anglicare and all the gang for having me along today. It's been great at Communities for Children for having this opportunity to spread the word, so to speak. I don't have all the answers, far from it. I've got a lot of experience in the family court system. I've seen a lot of things that are done the right way. I've seen a lot of things done the wrong way. But I think there's a real opportunity for us in this day and age, in this modern age of technology, to really make a difference moving forward. And that's what excites me. It excites me being able to share my film, my book, and the other resources that we produce. And it excites me that it resonates with people like yourselves, because we've all got our hearts put in the right place in terms of wanting to make a difference. And I think the power is in the tribe, and I think we can really do that. So it's a matter of sharing, caring, promoting the interests of children, getting the message out there, and standing behind that message for kids. And I think if we do that, I think slowly but surely we'll be able to turn around that Queen Mary in the ocean and really make a difference to kids long term, because yeah, they deserve it. We need to help them, because often they haven't been given a voice in the past, and I think that's changing.
Fine. I just wanted to say thank you to the participants. It's been great to have your input today. And I was going to thank you, Darren, but I'm not. I'm going to read what someone else has written. They say, what an incredibly powerful piece of work. Thank you for bringing your wealth of experience and passion to something that has potential to promote reflection and change behaviours within these all too common family scenarios. Every story has its own complexities, but it seems that all too often it's the child's heart that is damaged. Your film is a gift to these children and to their parents who find themselves in such situations. I just have to say one thing. Someone has written, will Legal Aid Tasmania be more proactive in promoting this message? I reckon that's a question for us to make sure that Legal Aid has that information that you've been given. So thank you for what you've done. You've given us so much food for thought. We've got resources that we didn't have, and thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Elizabeth, just before you go, on that question that was in the last session about children with ASD, I would say with the appropriate tools that parents with ASD have in relation to dealing with their children and their behaviours, I think on a simplistic level, I think the book Tommy and Tiger Terry has some basic levels for children. So in answer to that question that was previously made, I think it is relevant. I think the film would not be, of course, but the film, of course, has other messages for parents which might be compelling in other ways. So I just thought I'd hark back to that, because I remember at the start of the session you wanted to talk about that, but just for that listener, I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.